I'm going to show logging onto Hypergator and processing the data for Module 3. This is a very basic processing with FreeSurfer. We're going to use a command called recon all, but I'm going to walk through the steps on this. So my browser, I'm going to go to ood.rc.ufl.edu, and I had already logged in, but you would need to log on. If it's the first time doing this on a browser, you would need to select your university, in this case University of Florida, and log on with your GatorLink ID and password. And so we see this, and I'm going to show where the data are. So you can come up to Files, and then you should go to Blue CLP7934, and then into Share. Within Share, there's a lot of directories that are created, and there is this Module 3 directory. Now in here are a few files, and what I ask is don't do anything in this location. You copy files or directories out of here into your own directory. So I'm going to copy it from the command line because that works a little bit better. So within this location, Blue CLP7934, Share Module 3, I will open in Terminal. And then just to show that we are in the same location, at the top of the screen it says the location, but I can also type in the command ls to list the contents of the directory and show we have the zip file, we have another directory that we'll ignore for now, and we have a shell script file that we're going to be dealing with a little bit later. But for now, there's this adni_t1w.zip file. If you have not done this already, copy this from this shared directory into your own directory in the class share drive. And how you do that, cp copy, and then you start typing the name, and I like to hit tab to autocomplete. So copy this zip file, and then I am going to copy it up one directory, so that is 2 dots. This is a relative path, meaning relative to where I am now in Share Module 3. I want to go up one directory to Share, and there's a slash for the directory, and then I'm going to go into my directory. So I have created a directory for each of you, so you should be able to put in your GatorLink right there. And so I can go up to my directory, and then within my directory by putting the trailing slash on it. Okay, so we have this path. I hit enter or return, depending on your keyboard, and it didn't look like it did anything, but let's go to that location. So I'm going to change directories. I will go up one level and go into my directory. And then if I list the contents of the directory, we'll see a few things. Now, I already have dealt with this directory previously, meaning I had moved the zip file and extracted it and had already done some things, but we're going to show this process again. So to unzip the file, we can just type unzip. So again, only do this within your current directory. And so I'm going to unzip the directory, and a lot of things will be printed to the screen. Let me know if you have any errors. That would be a permissions issue, and there is a way to potentially to fix that. You can change the ownership of the file, everything, but hopefully it's not going to cause any problems. And so now I have unzipped this, but it has created a directory called adni_t1_dicom, and that was a name that I had given it. And you can keep that name, or you can rename it by using the move command. And so you can move and then you do your input. So this is that directory, and then it could be whatever you want, but it could be adni underscore T1 weighted. But I'm not going to do that because I already have that directory. So this is a second copy of it. Now, what I do recommend at this point is if you have successfully extracted, unzipped this file, then you can clean up your directory and can remove that zip file. So this will permanently delete it. It'll happen almost instantly, and it's gone. So again, don't do this on the module 3 file at all. Only do this on the copy of it. So that file is now gone. You don't have to do that. It's not that large of a file, but this keeps it a bit cleaner. Okay, so part of this assignment was creating a kind of what we call a BIDS, this brain imaging directory structure format. And there's only 2 images in this new folder that we extracted, this adni T1 dicom. And so I'm not going to, we're going to do this by hand, meaning kind of convert and move this into this structure by hand. And this was shown in class in the video. We'll try to recreate this. Might do it a little bit differently, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new directory. And I'm going to call this ADNI, A-D-N-I, this Alzheimer's Disease Neuroimaging Initiative data. And then I'm just going to call it underscore BIDS. You don't have to do this. You can have the structure somewhere else, but this is just a way to kind of keep track of this. So I'm going to make this directory. So if I ls, we can see adni underscore BIDS in here. So just to show you on this other side, I'm going to come back to this other tab. I'm going to go to the share drive. I'm going to go into my directory in shared, and we can see I have this adni underscore BIDS directory. So we're going to ignore that for a second. And what we want to do is, if we notice, we extracted these files. These were all .dcm files. Those are the dicom files. These are what come from the MRI scanners. And so what we want to do is convert these into NIfTI files, which will just give one file per subject, and so we don't have to deal with all of these many inputs. So to do that, we're going to use a program, software called dicom to NIfTI-X. Now, normally we would do this within a script because it could take longer. We're trying to do this on a lot of participants, but because we only have 2 participants and it's just going to be one image for each, we can kind of do this live. So I'm going to go into this adni T1 dicom directory. Again, you might have renamed it. If you had already done this, you might have already renamed it as this adni underscore T1W or whatever the case may be. But I'm going to go into that directory, and then within there we have 2 participant directories. So just to show what's inside each one, we have, I'm going into this first one, the 6303 directory, lists the contents, and there's a directory in there called Accelerated Sagittal MP Rage. And MP Rage is the T1 weighted image. And so if we go into that, and I'm actually going to go in a few levels, so I can hit tab, because there's only one directory inside there called 2019-430. And there's another directory in there. And then within that directory are all of the dicom files. Okay, so now we're in this directory, present or print working directory PWD. You can see this whole path: blue CLP 7934 share, my gator link, the ADNI T1 dicom directory, the participant, MP Rage directory, the date, and another directory. So this whole long path. And so what I'm going to do is go back up to this level. Now there's different ways to do it. I could CD up a few times with those double dots, or I could just select and this will auto copy that path. So that was auto copied, and then I will do paste. If you're on Windows, it should be a Control V. If you're on a Mac, it will be a Command V. There's different ways to paste it, but that's going to change into this directory. So again, we're back up where it was just this accelerated sagittal MP Rage, this directory. So now within here, we're going to run the dicom to NIfTI. And to use this, we have to load the software to make it available. So we're going to load 3 software packages though. First one, we're going to module load. So that's how you load things on Hypergator and many other of these big high performance clusters. So we do this module load. There's spaces in there, module load. And the first one I'm going to load is something called GCC 5.2.0. Now, don't worry about what that is. We're just going to load it. I can do another space and load in a software called MRI CRO-GL, Micro GL, or MRI CRO GL. And this is software that will include that dicom to NIfTI. And then we're going to load one more software called PIGS, P-I-G-Z. And to load PIGS, we need to load this GCC application or software. And so that's why we're loading that one. But PIGS will, it's a fast way to compress files. So we're going to save these files out as a NIfTI file, but one that is compressed, as it's a gzipped. And so we load these. Notice there's always spaces between the names on here. These are different ones. And so now they're available. So now what we can do is run DCM to NIIX. And one way to check to make sure that you can actually run this is to start typing something like this, DCM to N, and hit tab a couple of times. And we can see there's a couple options. DCM to NII batch or DCM to NIIX. We want the NIIX. And so now we're calling the software. So that means I want to use this software, and now we need our input. And our input is going to be actually just our current directory. But just to make sure that this converts in a way that makes sense, meaning we want this to be a compressed NIfTI file, and maybe we want to even rename the file, we're going to put a couple of flags, a couple of options first. So one of those is I'm going to do -Z, so that's like a minus sign, -Z, yes. And that is telling the software use this PIGS, well in this case we're going to use PIGS, but we're going to use PIGS to compress the NIfTI file. We want it gzipped, so it'll have a file extension .gz. And so we're going to compress it, and then I'm also going to give it a file name, and I'm going to give it a file name that is going to match sort of a BIDS naming convention already. And so to do that, what we can do is, so -F, and there's a space, and then I'm going to do a sub, and this is just a naming convention, dash, and then we'll do the 011. I'm just going to squish everything together. Could probably do the underscores but underscores also mean something else in here. Actually, I've said you probably can't do the underscores, I should say. And so I'm just going to squish it all together. So subject 011 S6303. And that can be whatever your subject ID is, your participant ID. I prefer ones that really don't have anything in them, meaning no dashes or underscores or anything. So the dash in this case is needed for the sub dash, and that's part of the naming convention. Or you could just do the 6303 or whatever the case is. But we're going to put all of that in, and then an underscore, and then you can do what's called a session. So someone might have an MRI, and then they come back 3 months later or 5 years later, and they get another MRI, and that would be a different session. And so with the BIDS convention, we like to have the session specified. And there are different ways to call the session. So it would be underscore ses, S-E-S, dash, and so you could have something like base or baseline or pre or post or whatever the naming convention is. There's flexibility there, but just for simplicity, I'm just going to call this session 1. Now, I don't know if that's true for this particular scan. Some of these participants from this study were scanned multiple times, but we'll just pretend session 1. And then underscore T1W. And technically, it's going to have a .nii.gz on here, but we don't have to put that because this is converting to this format. So that's a name. It's kind of a long name, but it is meaningful. It has a subject identification, it has a session, and it has the type of scan it is. So another space, and then I'm just going to put a dot. A dot means the current directory. So what this is going to do is use dicom to NIfTI X to convert the files in the current directory. And in this case, there's just one set of scans. There is this MP Rage, which is a T1, and that's down a couple of directories, but the software can look down inside directories. So I'm going to convert these dicom files, and it's going to save it as a nifty.gz file. That's the .gz comes from this Z with a Y after it. So yes, this is making a GZ file. And then we're going to save it out as a file name. Now in this case, because there's just one type of image in this directory, we can do this whole naming and name it right as a T1 file. If I was running this command on the directory and there were a lot of different types of scans, let's say there was T1 and T2, there were diffusion scans, there were functional MRI and all sorts of things, I would leave off this -F and just have it find all the different scans and just kind of automatically name them something. And there's a lot of options with the software. You can actually change the defaults, or you can change a naming and have it make sense. But I sort of typically use the defaults and just let it name. But in this case, because we're trying to get into kind of a BIDS-esque format, we can give it a BIDS naming convention. And because there's just the one scan. So I push enter, return, and it's done. It takes less than a second in this case because it's just one scan to do it. Now, if I type ls, we should have that directory, but now we should have two new files, the NIfTI file and this JSON file, which is a text file that includes a lot of information about the scan, and that file needs to stay with the NIfTI file. And the NIfTI file can be used without it, but just for organization, you want those together. Okay, so there is one. So now for the homework, it's convert two of these. So I'm going to go up one directory. So we were in 6303. I'm going to go into 6367. And so tab to autocomplete. And so everything's the same up until the last 2 digits. So it completed to that point, and then it doesn't know what you want, but at that point I can just type 67, and now I'm in there. So I'm in this directory. Notice we don't have a converted NIfTI file because it hasn't been done yet. Now, shortcut, push the up arrow key on your keyboard, and you can go back to get previous commands. There's other commands. You could type a history command, HISTORY, history, and that will print commands you've run. I won't do that, but you can sort of up and down keys to get your different commands. So we do need to change this before we run it again, because we want to change the output. So the output is not 6303, it's 6367. So I just change those 2 digits and run it. This one took slightly longer. I don't know why it took a little bit longer. It doesn't really matter. It was very fast. And so it's done. And now within here, we have these files. Okay, so I'm going to show these within the directory. So I was working in this directory. So I go in it, here's 6303, here's that JSON file, and the NIfTI file. NIfTI file is larger, almost 13 megabytes. JSON file is small, less than 2 kilobytes, because it's just a text file. I can click on it, and it will open, and we can see information about the scanner is a Siemens Prisma. This was at Washington University. This is an MP Rage. All of these different technical information about the scan. And as I said in class, if this wasn't a research scan, this could have a patient's name in it. So there could be protected health information in here. And so there would be concerns about HIPAA. And so we have to be cautious with this. These are publicly available research scans, so they are HIPAA compliant and good to use for our cases. But this is the JSON file. Not much that in this class, won't do a lot with this. I can just close that. And the NIfTI file, in class we showed viewing this, and I won't go through all of that. We're just going to focus more on the conversion as we did the organization into the BIDS structure, which we're mostly done with, and then running with FreeSurfer. Okay. So I'm going to go back now to the command line. So again, because these are for only 2 participants and it was only one scan, this T1, the MP Rage, just one for each, we could do this kind of live here in the browser in this session. Normally you could do all of these commands in a script that's submitted to Hypergator, and we're going to show that process. Not the conversion, we took care of this, but we're going to show the scripting process. But before we get to that, let's get these into the BIDS directory. So what I'm going to do is move both of these files into this BIDS directory I created. So I created one called BIDS. Now right now there's nothing in here. And so we need to create some directories. But what I'm going to do is create, and technically a BIDS directory structure is going to have more things in it. There's going to be some other files that talk about the participants and other cases. We're not going to worry about that right now. But within here, we're going to want a full directory for each participant, and then we're going to have some subdirectories. And so I'm going to make those. So what I'm going to do is make a directory, and I'm actually just going to do this from where I am. And what I mean by that is sometimes when I make a directory, I'm going to go into that directory where I want to be. So I want to go into here, this add any bids. But in this case, I'm just going to make it from where I am because I want to show you that. So I'm going to come over here and copy the path, or you can copy it from the top of the screen. Make sure you get the / before blue, but I'm going to copy the path and then come over here and I'm going to paste it. But now we're not done. What we want is within this BIDS folder, we want a directory for each participant. We just have 2 participants. So who are our 2 participants? We have the 63, 67. So I copy that. So I double clicked on ID, or you can just type it out. But then within that directory, I'm going to have a session. And again, just session 1. And then we want a NAT. This is anatomical, so this is going to have T1 files. There are other types of anatomical scans, FLAIR, T2, and so others. And so those would go in here, but we only have this T1. And so we're going to make this directory, and the whole path -p means path, so it will make directories that don't exist. So in this case, this directory, the participants directory, does not exist. The session does not exist, and the inat folder does not exist either. So it will create those 3. So I do that. I want to do this one more time for the other participant. The other participant, remember, the ID was this 6303. We can see it right there. Or again, 6303 that we had converted versus a 6367. So we want a 6303. And that's the only change we need to make. So just to verify that that did what we wanted, we can come back over here and refresh the page. And we can see 6303, session 1, a NAT. There's nothing in it. And that's what we expect. We haven't put anything in it yet. Now, what we want to do is I'm in the 6367. So what I want to do is I want to move. You could copy. I'm going to be daring, if you will, and just move these files. Again, I would recommend copying it, so CP instead of MV, but I've done this before, so I'm going to move the files, and I'm actually going to do this in one command. I want to move that JSON file and the NIfTI.gz file, but I'm going to do it in one command. So here's how I do that. So I'm going to move this, and I'm going to put an asterisk at the end. So it's going to find anything called this dot something, and we have a dot JSON, and we have a dot NII.gz. So it's actually going to move both files, and then this is 6367. So I want to move them into that location. So I'm going to highlight it. Again, make sure you have the slash, the / at the beginning, and also make sure you have the / at the end. That's important in this case. So we want to move these files. Whatever files in our current directory that are named this. In this case, we have 2 files, a JSON and a NIfTI.gz, and they're going to move into this directory, the inat directory. So enter. Are they gone? ls. Now they're not there. So I'm going to go up one directory, and I'm going to go into 6303. We still have those files there, but I'm going to move those into 6303. And I need to change one more thing in here, 6303. So notice I'm using what I had run before, but I just needed to make little changes. And so 011 S6303, and that's going into 011 S6303, and we're good. I just realized I actually have an error in here. Hopefully you saw the error. We'll fix that error. Okay, so the error is this. So now I want to go into this directory, and I need to fix the names of a couple of directories. So both of these directories, I had done their name. This is coming from the ADNI dataset. I actually need to have the SUB in front of it. So I'm going to move 011-6303. And so moving in this case is renaming. So sub 011, and I'm going to get rid of all the spaces, S6303. Just like that. And if we look, now we have a 011 S6367, and then we have one with a sub prefix. So we'll do the same thing for the other one. So 6367, 6367. And so now if we come back over and I refresh, we have these directories, and we can verify that there's still a session one, still in a NAT, and there's the two files in there. So the moving just renamed that parent directory, this one, without doing anything to what was within. And okay, so here's our very basic BIDS structure. Now we're ready to process with Hypergator. We are in Hypergator, but we're going to use Hypergator to process with FreeSurfer and using this recon all command. Now what I'm going to do is within this directory, I'm going to make a new directory. I can do that from the command line. I'll show up from here. So new directory. I'm going to call this one code. C-O-D-E. And so within that directory, we're going to copy a file. So that file that you're going to copy, again, don't delete this one, module 3, and then I have this recon all underscore sub 6303. So we're going to try copying it from here. Sometimes you get errors on this, but I'm going to select it, do a copy, and don't move this one. This is going to be a copy. So go back up to share, go into your directory, and then go into that ADNI BIDS directory, whatever you had called it, and then into code, and then hit copy. Don't do move. If you get an error, then you can do that from the command line, and that would be copy, and you put in the path for where it was, and put it in here. Now, I'm going to make this match my naming convention that we had done over here, where we have the whole sub 011S6303. So there are different ways to rename it. You can rename it this way. I can rename, and I'm going to put in the whole name, the 011S6303. Now to keep this simpler, we're going to just edit this by sort of by hand on here. Notice it gave me an error. I'm going to try again. It sometimes gives errors. It's giving me an error, so I'm going to rename this by the on the command line. So I'm in ADNI BIDS. I have a directory called code, so I'm going to go into code, and there is that recon all sub 6303. So I'm going to move that, and there's only one file in this directory, so I can actually just hit tab before starting to type anything, and there's only one file, so it knows what to look for. So I'm going to move that, and I'm going to hit tab again, but I want to rename it. It needs to be the 011S6303, and then this works. So the command line works. The renaming and moving this way doesn't always work. And so there's that file. Now, what's in this file? So this is a shell script, and this is one specifically designed to work on HyperGator. And so we're going to look at this file. Now there's multiple ways to look at it. You could download it and use something like Visual Studio Code. Again, don't use Word or Google Docs or any of those things for the coding. You don't want to use WordPad, you know, whatever. You want to use a text editor. And you also have to be careful because some text editors, like TextEdit on the Mac, will default to a rich text file, and you don't want that. So what we want to have is we use kind of a pure text editor, and there's one built in on HyperGator. There's other ones you can do purely in the command line. That's what I prefer for like quick edits. But the safest way is to download the file, which you can check it and you can download it, and then you would use Visual Studio Code, which you would need to install if you don't have that installed. It's free. It's pretty quick to download and install, and could use that. But just for our sake, I'm just going to do this all on the browser. So I want to edit this because we need to update some things in it. So, and you would need to do this as well. So you can click on the three dots, arrow, edit. So this will open up a new tab in the file editor. So now this is a file, a little script that I had created to process one of these brains with FreeSurfer. And we're going to walk through it, show what it's doing, and then make some changes. So the first line of it is that hashtag !bin/bash. That should be the first line of every script, at least for a bash script, which is what we're using. And so you need that hashtag. It needs to look like that. Now, lines 2 through 11 are specific to HyperGator. A lot of other research computing environments, these high performance clusters, will use the same system. So what works on HyperGator, if you're at a different university or you're working for a government or business and they have a similar setup, meaning kind of a supercomputer or high performance, likely they're going to be using the same sort of interacting system. But those are going to be telling the computer essentially how much time you need, how much RAM you need, and different things. So let's walk through those. The first one, job name. This is whatever you want to call it. You could call it something like cat or hippopotamus or whatever. It doesn't really matter that much, but it's helpful to have it called something that makes sense with your data. So I'm just going to add in the 011S6303. You don't have to do that. This is just a name for HyperGator to have. And then the next line, mail type, and this has an end, comma, fail. So this means that you will get an email when the script finishes, or if it fails. The options you see are none, begin, end, fail, or all. Now all can be okay, so that can be when it begins, you can get an email. If there's an error, you get an email. If it ends, you get an email. And that's okay if you're just running one or two things, but I've accidentally left that on before. I had an all in there and I'm running like 200 things. So in a short period of time, I get 200 emails and all these things. And it's kind of a little bit of a hassle to deal with for a little bit. But so end and fail, usually when I do it, I just do fail, but for our purposes, I would recommend you having end, so you'll get a notification when it's done. So then you put in your email address, next line, and these are here. You can copy this script and just change the email address. Don't send this to me. I mean, you could if you wanted to, but it's better for it to go to you so you know when it's done. So the next line is number of tasks equals 1. So I'm just going to run this on one CPU, and we'll leave it at that. And then the next line is a double dash, CPUs per task equals 6. Now, usually I'll just select 1 on here, but for our purposes, we're going to have this process a little bit faster. Not that it's needed, but we're going to try it out. And so this is requesting 6 cores, and basically like 6 CPUs to think of, even though I said on a single CPU, but a little bit different setup here. So this is 6 cores, think of it that way. I'm going to request 24 gigabytes of RAM. That's about 4 gigabytes per core, which should be sufficient for this. How do I know that? Trial and error on my part. So that's 24 gigabytes. And then time is requesting 12 hours. So 12:00:00, so hours, minutes, seconds. To be safe, we could bump this up, but because we're requesting more cores, then and this should process faster. 12 hours should be sufficient. If for some reason it takes longer than that, it might just end. We'll kind of address that later. Probably not in this video. But if you have errors, contact me and we'll figure it out. Account is the class. CLP7934, if this is the only account that you have, you don't need to put that. But I recommend you putting it, because what we're going to do is we're going to ask for a particular QoS, a quality of service. In this case, we're going to ask for burst allocation, and that will give us more cores as a class. So there are 20-something people in the class. We have 32 cores, so that means each person gets about 1 core. But if all of you wanted to run this at the same time, then, and we're requesting 6 cores, that wouldn't work. And so what we're going to do is we're going to request burst allocation, and this is going to push the this processing a little bit at a lower priority for HyperGator. But if there are available cores, then it will run it, and then it's running and it'll complete. And if we were just doing 1 CPU per task, you wouldn't have to worry about this. You could get rid of that -B, and it would be a sort of normal priority job. And then the output, this is going to be a log file that's saved in the current directory, wherever kind of you run this. And I'm just going to put in that whole ID again on it. Okay, so the first line is going to print working directory, the host name and date. So date is going to be so when this job is starting, and it's going to have date and time and all of that. And then pwd, print working directory. So it'll just show where you are. Host name is a computer. So this is one I kind of put in everything. I'm getting this from the HyperGator team. So let me show you that. So a helpful resource, help.rc.ufl.edu. And then commands, there's all sorts of different things you can click around at, but they have job script examples. And so a basic single-threaded job, you can expand this and see, you can just copy and paste all of this. Now, it would have to be modified for your needs, but that's a good start. And so that's what I did, is I took this, I copied that into a script, and then I just modified it, added things, changed things to fit what we need. But they do the present working directory, host name, date. So I was showing where we got that. And so that's just at the start of the script. Those are the first 3 commands. Now they have a semicolon between them, and that means that they are going to run the first command, then it runs the next command, then it runs the next command. You could also put them on new lines, like that, and it would do the exact same thing. And that's probably the best thing to do, but just to make it a little bit more compact, can do that. Now you don't need the space before the semicolon. I kind of like having the space there just to have it there, but you can get rid of the space. Okay, so those are the first 3 commands it's going to run. Now it's going to run something else. Module load FreeSurfer. So that's the software we're going to use, and so we need to tell the script we want you to load FreeSurfer so we can do something with it. And I'm going to load FreeSurfer 7.4.1. There are multiple versions. This is the newest version, and it works. I tested it the other day, so we're going to use it. And then I'm going to define a directory, and this is going to be an output directory. You don't have to do this, but it sort of helps on this. Now this is something we're going to have to modify. Okay, so let's look at what we need to modify. So I have this NIBIDS directory, and then in here I have the 2 subjects and I have the code. So this is what we were just making. I'm going to make a new directory called derivatives, and this is not a calculus thing, this is going to be an output thing. Gave an error, so that means I need to do this on the command line. So I'm going to go into that directory, so the share, my folder, and then this new NIBIDS directory I created. I'm going to make a directory called derivatives. Now just make sure your spelling is consistent. You don't care how you spell derivatives, you can spell it how you want. Just make sure it's consistent in your script. And then I'm just going to go, I'm going to go into derivatives, print my working directory, and then I'm going to copy that path. So I'll go back to my file editor and paste over that. So now I have a path, and then there's going to be a FreeSurfer subdirectory, and might as well create that too, just to be safe. So let's go, I'm in derivatives. We already see I'm going to make another directory called FreeSurfer. And okay, so we're being safe with that exists. Now we're going to do one thing. And what we're going to do is show you how to do that in the script. So you don't have to make the directory. I was showing you making it, so you can do that if you make it that way. Here's also how you can do it in the script. So I'm defining a directory. So the sub_dir means, so this is going to be subject directory, and that's sort of a term from FreeSurfer. We'll show that below, but I'm just setting this as some path. So subject directory, so this is a variable. This is like an algebra X or Y or whatever variable, but this is a variable, and we're going to set it. This is a variable that doesn't exist naturally on the computer, probably, but we're going to set it to be this directory. That doesn't have to be in quotes. It could be single quotes, double quotes. It's usually safer to be in quotes just in case there's something in the path, but that Linux doesn't like, but we're going to keep it like this. So now there's this little loop here, or a kind of an if-then, not really a loop, but so we're going to check to see if this directory exists. If it doesn't, create it. If it already exists, and you don't do anything really. And so this is what I was saying. So you kind of know the path of where it should be. So that could be the share folder, your directory, whatever you called that directory, NIBIDS, and then what might be new would be derivatives / FreeSurfer. So I created those just to show that way, but you can have the script create it. So this is saying if not a directory, meaning so if this directory does not exist, then echo directory, and then the $sign in front of subdir in this case is calling the variable. And so if this directory, and it would have the whole path, does not exist, creating it now. And there's that make directory with the -p, which would make all of the directories along the way to it. And it would make that whole path. But if it already exists, then it would say the directory already exists and not do anything else. So in the script, you don't have to do anything other than change this path. Again, make sure this path is, don't put it in my directory, put this in your subdirectory, and that's going to be the case everywhere. Make sure that you are changing this to match your Gator link, and then make sure that this matches the name of your BIDS directory for these ADNI participants. Otherwise, you can just change those two things to match what they should be for you, and then the rest would be taken care of. Okay, and then this subjects dir, all in capitals, this is a variable that FreeSurfer sets, but the default for subjects directory is in a location that you can't write to, and so you have to change it on HyperGator every time you're going to use FreeSurfer. And so we're going to set that subjects dir to be equal to this whole path. Now, I could also just put that path there. So again, I could copy this, and instead of having that there, we could have the whole path there. But we already have this variable set, so it's a little more concise. And then we're going to change into a directory. Should probably change into ADNI BIDS. We don't have to, it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to change into ADNI BIDS as part of this script. Okay, so that's getting it set up. Now we're ready to run FreeSurfer, and we use the command called recon-all. That'll be reconstruct the brain, and then all, just this is the name. Okay, so to do this, we do recon all, and then we have a -s here, and then we have the subject. So I'm going to update this to be 011s. And that's this name, 011s6303. So this is setting kind of the output subject name, and I'm going to have it match what we have from this BIDS format. So subject 011s6303. If you're processing the other brain, which we need to do, and I won't show you that because we'll let you update all of these to do that, then you would change that to match. And then input, you're going to have this whole path. So the path, I have the whole path in here, and there are multiple ways to accomplish this. We'll just leave it like this. So make sure you edit this to be correct for your path. So you shouldn't have a JJ Tanner in here, and this should be different. So in this case, I need to update this a little bit. So I'm going to update this first part to match the path. I had done different processing, a trial, just to work through this differently. And so within this ADNI BIDS, again, I have a sub 011s6303. So I need to have a sub 011s6303. And then remember, we have in there's a session 1. And these are just single clicks. You don't need to double click on these. Session 1, a NAT, and then the name of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this, but I'm actually not going to rename it. I'm just going to copy this. So on Mac, Command-C, Windows, Control-C. I'll hit cancel. I'm not going to do anything with that. I'm just copying the name of that just as a shortcut. So subject, session, a NAT, and then I'm going to just paste over, and just to make sure I have the name there. Now the other flags here, you don't have to change these at all. You should have this -all, keep that. This -q cache, don't worry about that. We're going to talk about that in a future class, but we'll keep that on. And then because we requested 6 CPUs up here, we can do this -parallel -open MP, multiprocessor 6. And if you were just requesting one CPU, which is actually typically what I do on Hypergator, then you wouldn't have anything after this. That would all be deleted. And so I'll show that as an example here. So I'm going to copy this whole command. I'm going to repeat it there, and I'm going to put the hashtag in front, and that would mean this is a comment, meaning it's not going to run it. And so I could get rid of that. So that could be what it looks like. But again, if I was going to run that and not this one, I can comment out something. So commenting out, and so that would be ignored when it's being run. But I'm just going to get rid of that. But again, so if you don't request 6 CPUs, which you don't have to, it's just going to take a little bit longer. In that case, I would request maybe 16 hours of time just to be safe. But with 6 processors, this should probably only take about 3 or 4 hours to run. And then so that is processing with FreeSurfer. This recon all, and this will run kind of automated script and everything. And then at the end, due date, so when this finishes, it'll print when it finished. Okay, so save that. An error occurred. That's great. Not really great. So I'm going to copy all of this. I'm going to try saving again. Maybe it saved, but just to be safe, we'll copy all of that. I'm going to close this because I have this copied. So this is where doing it offline in Visual Studio Code is safer, and really kind of what I would recommend. So I just deleted all of it. That's not what we want. Paste it back just to show I have it copied. Save it. I think it's saving. I didn't get an error. Got an error, but I think it might be saved. But before I go out of that window, I'm going to open up Visual Studio Code. And I'm going to paste all of that into Visual Studio Code. And so I have it somewhere else, and I should save this early, but we'll see if this actually saved or not. So I'm going to close this, and we'll see if it saved or not. It might not have saved. If that case, again, I have it in a different window. So it is renamed. I can click on it, and I'm not editing it. I'm just clicking on it, but we see it was not saved. So let me just try editing it one more time in here just to see if this will work. I will paste in my updated one, save it. I didn't get an error, so I'm okay. But again, I really will recommend just downloading the script, edit in something like Visual Studio Code, and do that, because that'll be a lot safer. So if you're going through the browser, save things elsewhere as much as you can. And just to verify, we have the new ID, this is the new path, and it was good, it was saved. Okay, so now that's only one participant. Now you could put the other participant in there as well, meaning we could have this, and what we could do is have another recon all command under this, do the other participant, make sure you have a different input, and it would process both of them one after the other. So that's one option, and you would just make sure you probably request a little bit more time, and although 12 hours should be enough for both of these, but for the homework you need to do both of them. So you can put it in there. So again, I'll show you. In that case, you could just copy this, You don't have to have a space in between them. It just helps with readability. And then you find the other directory. And the name of this isn't quite match if you're running more than one, but it's okay. So the other participant is 6367. So 6367, 6367, 6367. And everything else should be the same because this is actually an output directory. And we've changed the name in every location up there. So in that case, this is a script that really isn't just processing one person, now it's going to process both. And we could request more time just to be safe, whatever, 18 hours, that should be plenty on this. If not, it would end and would start over, request more time. So that's going to be one option, is to do that. And that would be a serial processing, and that's fine for a few brains, but if you have to do this for 200, you don't want to just run one at a time. Hypergator, we can run a lot at a time. And in that case, there would be some modifications, other modifications to this. But so this is okay as this example. So I'm going to save that. That'll do both of them. And then I can close it. Notice I didn't get an error, but to be safe, copy, paste if you're using this, and we'll close it. The other option is you make a copy of this shell script and you rename it. So we can do that. It's easiest actually in the command line. So I'm going to go into code, and so there's that script, so I can copy the script, and I'm going to make this 63, the other ID 67. So I make a copy of the file, save it as a new name, and there is that new file. Now, I'll show you a different way to edit it. So for quick edits, what I usually use is a software called Nano. And so I'm going to do Nano 6367 and tab to complete, and this will open this in here. So you can't point and click with a mouse. It's all just arrow keys up and down like that. It's a little counterintuitive in many ways. Go around, and really we shouldn't need that much time. I'll request less time, keep everything the same. I'm just going to replace anywhere where it's 6303 with 67. And so all of that is fine. And if I had done this before, I had added in another recon all, then I would just edit this line. And so anywhere that had 6303, I would change the 67. So a shortcut to get rid of this entire line is Control K. It's gone. So I can Control K and that line is gone. And so just like that, I can have an updated script. So this, remember I had already edited 6367. So because everything else is the same, it's consistent other than just the name, then this will process that individual. Now there are other even faster ways to do this, more automated. If you have to do it for a lot of people, there are ways to do this in a loop and find and replace and all of that. We won't worry about that, but now we have a second script. And so I'm going to save this out. To save it is Control, even if you're on a Mac, Control O. So that write out. And I'm just going to push Enter or Return, and then Control X. And that has saved it. It's a little counterintuitive, so you might want to use, you could use Visual Studio Code, you can edit it, you can make a copy, you could edit it in here. But now we'll see that there are two scripts, 6303, 6367, and they can be submitted for processing. Now, if we have two of them, then what we'd do is we would make sure that this first one does not have both of them in it. And so again, these are two options. 2 copies of a script and one with each individual in it, and the file, or you can do one with both of them in it. And because I'm requesting more processors, I'm going to go with just this one. I was showing the other way. The other way is typically how I do it. I just do 1 person per script for the most part for something like this. And so this is the one that I'm going to actually submit. So how do we submit it? So we submit it like this. Okay, so I'm in code, and we have the 6303, but remember that 6303 for me has both participants in it. So actually this 6367 I'm not going to use at all, so I'm going to delete it. Don't do this unless you really want to delete it because it's gone. But in my case, the other one has both. I'm going to run them. I'll just run one at a time. That's fine. So I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, so to submit a script on Hypergator, you do s batch, all in lowercase, space, and then you have the name of the script. So I just have one file in this folder now. I can just hit tab and autocomplete, and I push enter, return. It's submitted, and it's going to start at some point. There's often a little bit of a delay, and we'll see if it starts. Now, how do you know if it starts? How do you know if there's an error? You should get an email if there's an end, kind of, we'd put that in the script. Again, if we look at this, end or fail. So if it fails for some reason, you should get an email. So that could be one way to check. I should note about fail. Fail doesn't mean that it necessarily worked. That sounds a little bit weird, but fail just means that something in the script failed, but the script doesn't necessarily know if recon all failed, if this FreeSurfer processing failed. And so fail doesn't mean that the script worked entirely as intended. And so let's see if this is running. So I can go back up here up to jobs, active jobs, and I can see that this job is still queued, so it hasn't started yet. And so we're still waiting for it to start. I had requested burst access, and so that is deprioritized, so that can take some minutes to start. It could technically take hours to start, but it should be started pretty soon. So I can kind of refresh that if I wanted. It's still queued. So we're going to stop the recording here, and I'll assume it starts. Again, if you have errors, there's probably, it could be a typo somewhere. So do a little bit of your own kind of debugging. You can potentially put it into your code into something like ChatGPT or Google Bard to see, say, are there any errors with this code? And that can sometimes work. It's not always perfect, but it's usually pretty good. It can help find little things in there and make some suggestions for improvements. Okay, so now I refreshed and it says it's running. It's running on that particular queue. It's been going for 5 seconds. Now, it hasn't done much in that time. Refresh, 19 seconds now. But let me just show you what it would look like. So I'm going to go back to files. And again, this isn't anything that we can look at yet other than a log file. So this is my add any BIDS. And then where is this? This is in code. So that's the script that it's submitted with that sbatch command. And then there's this log file. So I can click on the log file. And I often like to open this up and look at it pretty quickly to see if it's running, because we should see something like this. So a directory, I don't see anything that says error. Don't worry what all of this means, but what you can look at is FreeSurfer. It's finding it. imported this file. It renames it into this MGZ format. MGZ is a Massachusetts General Hospital, which is where the FreeSurfer team is housed and where it's being developed primarily. And so it read it, and it's doing some things. So it converted the file, and it's doing some processing and doing a lot of things. So that's what we expect. It's working. It didn't, it was able to find the file and everything, so it should be good. Now, if I open the log up again, there could be more on it, although it's doing this one step, and this one takes some minutes to run. And so it doesn't look like it's made any progress, but it's working away. And so this log file will save this log of everything that's done. FreeSurfer also saves a log in a different location. So where is that? We put this in derivatives, FreeSurfer. Now there's this subject that has been created, multiple files or directories that were created. And then there's the scripts. It's running. And there's the log file and all of this. We'll go over those in a future video and a future class. But this is working, so we'll assume this will complete. And then I did both of these in the same script, both of the brains. So the next one will start once this one is done, and then I'll get an email when it's done. And that's it.